This is my week of trading for the month of October. First thing I watched at the open was the save, but this thing didn't open with the market. I can tell because there's no volume that came in at the open, so this ended up opening late. So my first trade ended up being just a quick scalp on the little M, which was on the carryover list from Friday. I did okay with this last week off the 2-day sell-off, not the easiest to get filled and had some spread, so couldn't make much off the quick drop. And then I had an order out for the Goose as a 5-minute 1-2-3. This gap down on guidance, but never triggered and took out what would have been my stop, so canceled my order. No problem there. It's when it takes out my stop after it triggers me in that gets me. It did end up being a shakeout, so I was waiting for that 5-minute to close to put in a new order with new numbers, but didn't wait for me. Didn't want to jump in either since the market was starting to get bought at this time. I then tried to scalp the Lucid. This was also from last week. The little M and this one were the two watches for me from the carryover list, but didn't go anywhere. Then I saw the Goose setting up again on the 15, but after doing some intense calculus in my head, the reward to risk was just not there, so I think I'm just letting this one go today. And of course that ended up actually working out better than I expected. Then went back and scalped the Lucid again, which slowly started to stair step lower and was up okay so far, until it decided to pop against me, missing my exit, so gave back everything I was up, so couldn't really get anything going this morning, until in the afternoon I came across Blind, giving a sell setup on the 15 with a tight stop, so gave this one a shot, triggered, and this one was just not moving. So I was managing some of my swing trades in the back, and this really took its time, but did follow through. Finally got something going, not a home run or anything, but it did get to my target. And then didn't do much for the rest of the afternoon and called it a day. Tuesday, my first trade was the IMUX. This gapped up on positive drug data news, so I was looking to enter over the first minute bar's high. It looked like it was going to pop, so I jumped in half my share size, thinking it was going to skip over my entry, and just immediately collapsed. So it punished me for getting it early. Thankfully, I was able to get filled at my proper stop, so only lost the half R I risk and nothing more. Then I shifted my focus to the gap down list, Boom, which was one of my top watchers and one of the bigger gaps this morning off guidance. I noticed the 5-minute entry, but just didn't like that spread, so I ended up not pulling the trigger on it. I also was watching the board this morning. The oil drillers were down this morning, so I tried to short off the 5-minute 1-2-3 and undersized it because I noticed not a lot was following through this morning. I noticed the boom that I passed on. This would have stopped out, so I actually got rewarded this time for sticking to my trading plan, not letting FOMO get to me like it did on the IMUX. And the board did end up following through a bit, but because I was undersized, I didn't exit at the bottom there, hoping for bigger targets. But noticing the volume at the bottom, I ended up trailing it bar by bar and didn't end up making much on it. Then I did have an order out on the GPC off the 1-minute breakdown, but it jumped 50 cents below my entry and lost interest once I noticed the volume with no follow through, so canceled my order before it could fill me on the bounce back up. And it looks like I got shaken out of that boar. This was the bigger target I was looking for, and upon review, I might have gotten shaken out either way on the 5 because it did trigger a 1-2-3 on the 15 and then took it out, so whatever. Moving on to the little M, still on the carryover list. Tried the sell setup on the 2, but looks like it's not doing much volume today, so it wasn't all that tradable. Then my Thinkorswim that had all my thumbnail charts decided, you know what? I think I'm just going to crash today. So I lost all of my charts that I worked so hard putting together in the pre-market. I did used to save my charts, but this kind of stuff rarely happens. So slowly kind of got lazy saving it every morning. So here I had to take some time to redo all of that. Then I had an order out to buy Zion as a breakout over the 5-minute. This gapped on earnings. Only thing I was unsure of was market timing on this since it was selling off. So it struggled a bit at first, but ended up getting to my one and only target, which was the prior high on the daily. Didn't quite get out at the very top, but was able to catch majority of the move. Then I tried scalping the Tilray. The cannabis stocks were popping on some news and jumped in a bit late here and completely flipped on me, so lost on it. Didn't like to see that. But later on, it gave a buy setup on the 5, so got back in it. Not with much size, since this time I was planning to give it some room. And this time it worked out. Had some as a scalp portion and some off the chart. Then took it easy for the rest of the afternoon and called it a day. Wednesday started off interesting. First symbol I went after was the upwork. This was gapping up, I believe, on guidance. I was looking to get in off the 2-minute, but once it triggered me in, I noticed that I got 15,000 shares instead of 1,500 shares. Whoops. Panic ensues and noticed it was up a penny and there was no spread at the time. So killed it, and I saw the bid didn't budge, but my fills were horrible. So I ended up losing an R on it and jumped back in right away with the proper share size. Ended up working, but by the end of it, I ended up breaking even on it, got tagged out half by a penny a bit early on the trail. Then I went after the ANRO, which gapped down a good amount on a downgrade. After I noticed the breakout failure, decided to try some short as it rolled over off the 1 minute. Was a bit tough to get filled on, so I was trying on both TOS and E-Trade, and ended up working much better than I expected. I'll take it. Then the Tilray from yesterday was waking up a bit again, so tried scalping it long, but didn't really move much. I also tried scalping the Lucid short as it stayed weak and breaking down on the hourly. This actually ended up coming in, so took it off the bottom there for a nice little profit. And the afternoon died out, so was mostly focused on swing trading. Thursday, BYON gapped on earnings. It did have 7-cent spread, but I decided to try it under the 1 minute and partially filled me on the trigger and took what I got filled on the drop on volume. Thought about the Tesla this morning. This was gapping like 18% or whatever it was. Was looking to get in over the 5 minute, but it didn't wait for it to close and took off. And I don't think it ever looked back. Then Tilray had a 1-2-3 on the daily now, so was hoping for a continuation move since it didn't go anywhere yesterday, but wasn't really moving at all again. So moved on to the MRNS, which gapped huge off failed drug trials. This became a penny stock and was difficult to get filled on off this breakdown. Worked really well, but couldn't get filled. Then Save was moving again today, but to the downside now. Was gapping down today on news about layoffs and selling off some of their planes. Tried the sell setup off the 5 minute, didn't really drop, and trailed it off the 5, pretty much break even. Back to the Tilray, this actually ended up working as a short instead. But of course I undersized it because I didn't think it had much room to drop, but as long as it worked, I'm happy. Then in the afternoon, I didn't do much or couldn't do much. I actually had this presentation/Q&A thing I needed to do. So just dabbled in some scalps like this GTX as a 15-minute 1-2-3. I also tried the Blink as a 15-minute breakout, which kind of worked, but overall took it easy for the rest of the day. Friday focused on the CPRI at the open. This was one of the bigger gaps this morning. I think it was down like 45% on news about their merger getting blocked. Big gaps like these, I also looked to fade it. So I tried it long over the 1 minute. Wasn't really going, so I ended up killing it under the 2 minute for a small loss. I also like the EVLV, another big gap down on reports of sales misconduct. So shorted it off the 2 minute 1-2-3, but only got filled 1,000 shares of the 5,000 I put out. Worked, but unfortunately only got very little filled and got out a bit late on the exit. I also like the Coor. I had tons of gap down watches this morning. This one had a 1-2-3 on the 5 minute as a short. This was an earnings gap, but I just messed up here because I thought it was going to trigger. And because it was on an uptick, I jumped in for half so I don't get skipped like I did with the EVLV. And of course, this ended up never breaking and taking out the stop. So it took another unnecessary half-hour loss like that IMUX earlier this week. Then I got back in the EVLV as it set up a 15-minute 1-2-3. Was still hard to get filled on, chased it a bit as it came in, and took it off the bottom over the 2 minute. Then I shorted the Joby on a 15-minute sell setup. This was a secondary offering, but was moving today. Kind of regretted adding to it as it gave a 1-2-3 on the 15 because it just wasn't going and into support. But ended up making new lows and turned out pretty decent and called it a week. So this week, I feel like my head wasn't in the game. If you follow my Instagram, you probably know, but my beagle Jarvis was in the hospital this entire week. We actually almost lost him from a bladder infection, which has now turned into cancer in the kidneys. And our nanny went to Korea for a month, so I've been having to watch Tyson more and some other things I'm not going to get into. But that's also why these videos have been a bit slow to release. But given the hectic week, thankful I'm coming out okay. Made some errors this week, whether it was intentional or not. But sticking to my trading plan kept me in the green. Hope you enjoyed this one. As always, I appreciate you for being here, and I hope to see you on the next one.